screen. Welcome everybody to the grand round of HCPA in collaboration with the School of Medicine of Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. Today we have the honor to receive Dr. Pierre Levy. Pierre was the first philosopher to develop the notion of cyberculture and collective intelligence supported by digital media. Born in Tunisia, he studied and made an important part of his career in France. Very early, he moved to Canada, where he was endowed with the Canadian Research Chair in Collective Intelligence at the University of Ottawa. He was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. He's a very productive professor and one of the most cited philosophers at all times. Pierre currently works with digital humanities at the University of Montreal and is the CEO and founder of Intellect Metadata Incorporation, responsible for several advances in digital humanities. Now he takes a step forward introducing IEML. The information economy meta-language is an innovative ontology and result of 20 years of multidisciplinary work led by Pierre Levy. The highlights of IEML are: it has the expressive power of a natural language, it has the syntax of a natural language, it has a computable semantics solving the problem of semantic interoperability, it allows collective intelligence to be reflexive, and it can connect linguistics, big data science, and new artificial intelligence technologies. The IEML could represent a milestone in global medical communication, paving the way for a huge evolution in clinical research and healthcare standardization. Fortunately, Pierre decided to introduce IEML in medicine. This effort began in psychiatry, and that's why I invited Mauricio Kunz, full professor of medicine and head of psychiatry section at HCPA. Our university psychiatry department is one of the most productive ones and brings together professionals with great skills in integrating medical knowledge with computer science and artificial intelligence. I also invited Luis Lam, professor of computer science at Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. Luis was also a former state chief executive officer of science and technology and is currently an MBA 23 Sloan Fellow at MIT Boston, USA. Both of them and myself will participate in the discussion session of today's grand round, led by Pierre Levy and named Information Economy Meta-Language in Global Medical Communication. Please, Pierre, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Now I'm going to share my screen and going full screen up. That's it. Okay. So I think it is important that we have an in-depth discussion. So I will try to be as brief as possible, and especially I will be brief about IML itself, and I will devote more time to the application in the health sector. First, I would like to emphasize the problem that I was trying to solve. And this problem is semantic interoperability of the metadata. And the metadata are a very important part of digital information. It is data about data. And you have various names for metadata systems that organize information, data models, knowledge graphs, ontologies, taxonomies, keywords, and so on. And the usefulness of metadata is the classification, retrieving, and processing of information, facilitation of search, and in artificial intelligence, automatic reasoning. This is the symbolic part, and the training of machine learning algorithms, because when you train algorithm on data, you have to label or to annotate the data. So there is still metadata in machine learning. The problem with all these metadata systems is that they are not interoperable. I'm not speaking about the interoperability at the level of standards or file standards. I am, because we have systems or languages or standards like RDF to solve this problem. It is more about the categories, the concepts, their relation, the architecture, the conceptual architecture of data models. And at this really semantic level, there is no interoperability, because there are different systems based on different basic concepts, and different theories, different disciplines, and so on. So it's more or less a Babel tower. That's why I showed you this image. And it's not very useful to use a natural language to tag or to categorize the data, because, as everybody know, the natural languages are multiple, ambiguous, and they change all the time. So that's why I invented IML. So basically, IML it's a language, and as any language, it's defined by a dictionary and a grammar. So you have a very limited dictionary, 3,000 concepts, but these concepts are very basic or elementary. So you can build any other concept from these primitive words of the language. And of course, you can build new concepts from the concept of the dictionary by using grammar to build sentences. And this grammar, of course, is completely regular. So as James Flett told at the beginning of this meeting, IML has the same expressive power as a natural language, and at the same time, it has an algebraic structure that leads to computable semantics. I'm not going into the details. There is a link here on this slide. You can go and you'll have a better description. So basically, IML is for translation between human languages and computer languages, between information systems, between natural languages, between disciplines, even between different theories of the same discipline, or between different ontologies of the same domain. It's very important to understand that it is not an ontology, okay? It's a language, and with this language, you can build as many ontologies as you want, but as these ontologies are expressed in this very regular language, they can communicate. Every concept of every ontology goes back to the same dictionary by means of the same grammar. So now let's speak about the application to health. In fact, I began to work on this subject with a medical startup that was worried about the big rate of misdiagnosis in psychiatry. And they wanted to correlate the pathological mental states to biomarkers in order to improve diagnosis. So I began to work with them, and their initial idea was exactly what is showed on this slide. That is, on the one hand, a set of biomarkers, and for example, you could take a little drop of blood from someone, make an analysis, and try to determine or at least ground a little bit your psychological or psychiatric diagnosis. So you have a classification of biomarkers on one side, and on the other side, you have a classification of psi markers. And here on the image, you have a representation of different spectra of psychopathological problems that has been designed by a research group called HiTOP. HiTOP means Hierarchical Taxonomy of Psychopathology. Everything that I am quoting here, you can find the reference in the notes of the PowerPoint that I have given to James. So you can see on the right of this image a representation of different categories of psychopathology by the famous DSM, the DSM-5, and a different organization by the research group HiTOP. Because you, I'm sure that some of you know this very well, but there are in fact different classifications of mental illness or categories of psychopathology. You have the classification of the DSM. You have the classification of the World Health Organization, which is slightly different. You have another research group called Research Domain Criteria. You have a Chinese classification of mental disorders. You have even a Latin American guide for psychiatric diagnosis, and you have a lot of other classification systems in psychology, for example, the well-known Big Five, and so on. So the problem was to, for this startup, this medical startup, was to choose one particular classification, and they were attracted by HiTOP because it is based on statistics, and they try to derive their categories from data. Now, it's very difficult to design a semantic metadata system for the representation of psychopathological categories, because there is a continuum between pathology and normality. The categories are notoriously fuzzy. The comorbidities are frequent. Generally, you don't have one single mental health problem, you have several. And sometimes patients with the same diagnosis do not share one single symptom in common. And as I told you, there are several classification systems. Nevertheless, there was in our little group, when we were discussing, a consensus that we should adopt a spectrum paradigm. This means that symptoms and disease will be organized in continuous spectra. They're not rigid and exclusive category, but it's a continuity. But the way the high top group were constructing their categories, even with spectra, result from correlations in data. But of course, when you have new data, you have new studies and so on. So the categories are also evolving. And there is a risk of having no ground at all and being in a situation of a kind of intellectual quicksand. So I proposed that we build a kind of semantic grounding. So here you see the general model that I designed. I think that we need a description of mental states or symptoms that is independent from the co-occurrences that are computed by statistical computation, and independent from the hypothesis that we can derive from the statistical co-occurrence. And then from this basis, we should be able to construct syndromes, which would be co-occurrence of symptoms in patient data, and then disease, which is co-occurrences, but no. Evolving by okay, so basically there would be a computation, a statistical computation of co-occurrence of symptoms inside every patient individually, and also a calculation of correlation at the level of populations. Okay. So all this would give way to reasoning on co-occurrence and hypothesis of causality and different kind of relations between symptoms. So the idea at the grounding level, this directory of symptoms and mental state, is that it should be organized as a kind of continuous semantic field with a fine granularity, a kind of background of molecular possible symptoms from which any large and rigid psychological or psychopathological category emerges as a figure. So the description of mental states would be like the background, and the syndrome, the disease, and the different spectra would be like the figures emerging from this background. Or you can also take the metaphor of a coordinate system. So the general organization would be this. You have this description of mental states. This is the gray rectangle. And there would be also a data model for risk factors, a data model for psychopathological types, also for medical treatments, and finally with biomarkers. And you see the different relations between risk factor and psychic state to be either risk factor 4, and between psychic states and psychopathological is a symptom 4, and with medical treatment may be cured by, and finally the correlation between biomarkers and psychic states. And all these relations, let's say there are two aspects. An aspect that is hypothetic, a priori, what we imagine, what we think, and also a relationship based on statistical calculation, machine learning, and so on. And we should be able to compare both. So this is a very general model. I imagine this for the mental health, but you can, of course, generalize to health in general. So now, in order to show you a little bit the model that I designed, I have to tell you something about IML grammar. So as I said, all the concepts are created by sentences from the words of the dictionary. So you create a new concept by designing a sentence, and then this sentence is a new concept, and it can be used in a new sentence. So it's recursive. Every sentence has 9 rows. So you have the root, like the verb generally, or it can be a noun if it is a noun phrase. You have what I call an initiator, what is in the classical grammar, you would call this a subject. An interactant, this is the object of the classical grammar. A recipient, a cause or instrument or other kind of ontological description. And you have complements of time, place, intention, and manner. And every sentence is made of 4 parts. The concepts themselves, and this is shown by the hash, as you can see it. Every concept can be inflected, like the moods, the conjugations, the number, the gender, and so on. You have cases for every role. For example, for the role place, you can have at the left, at the right, on top, at the bottom, and so on. And you have junctions. This is like and, or, but, and so on. So with these 8 rows and 9 parts, you can create any kind of concept, and you can organize them. So now I'm going to show you a little bit what does this ontology of mental states look like. And you please keep in mind that it is a work in progress. So as you are going to see, you can click on any concept to see how it is built, and all the concepts that compose another concept can be also observed, and this recursively. Also, the concepts are created in a functional way. This means that you can have sentences with variables, and at a particular role, you have not only one word, for example, but let's say 4 different words, and this generates 4 different sentences. So now I'm going into the application that I have developed, that I called IML editor. So, okay, so as you can see here, so this is the general architecture of the ontology. I'm not sure if you are able to read it.
It's perfectly readable, no problem.
It's readable, okay. So it's organized in 5 layers, okay? At the higher layer, this is called psychic autonomy. This is what we psychiatrists are hoping for our patients. We want them to be autonomous. So they should be able to self-regulate themselves. So, for example, they must have a pretty good judgment about real situation. They should have a normal behavior. They should be able to repair themselves mentally and physically. For example, they should be able to sleep, to eat correctly, and so on, to have exercise, I don't know. And they must have insights about themselves, and they should be able to present themselves to others in social situation, and so on. And of course, all these different functions are interdependent. Okay. So now let's go to the most basic layer. This is the memory, because without memory, there is no functioning psyche. Okay, so you go from the long-term memory, then the intermediary memory, and finally the awareness, attention, subliminal awareness, short-term memory, working memory, and so on. So everything is lying on this layer. So between the most actual and, let's say, material aspects of the psyche and the most virtual, which is the autonomy, you have 3 layers which are in fact at the same level. So the subject has to build himself or herself with self-reference, relation with others, and relation with reality in general. There is, of course, an emotional part, and we have to evaluate the quality of the emotion, quality of the humor, and also the objects of the desires and the emotions. The strength of the emotion, its orientation, is it externalized, internalized, and so on, and also the intensity, is there self-control, and so on, and finally the consistency of the emotion. For example, the relationship between what is felt inside the patient and what he expresses. Also, is there a relationship between the emotion and the real situation? And finally, there is a cognitive aspect. Mastery of language, language understanding, language production, the reasoning, reflection, planning and execution, and finally, sensory motricity. So this is the general organization. And of course, these are very broad categories. We can go into more details. For example, you can see here perception problems. If I go there, perception problems, voila. And you have some details. So you have one column for audition, one column for the sight, one for the smell, one for the taste, the touch, and the synesthesia. And you have several rows, one for hallucination, one for illusion, one for pain, one for impairment, and one for hypersensibility. So you can see that every time I try to cover the entire field. Okay, this is the general method. So now, how do you go into detail? So I can talk, for example. Okay. So I have clicked on auditory hallucination, and here you can see how the concept is created. So the root is perception problems. It's the object is the sense of hearing, and hallucination is the initiator. So you see how it is constructed. And I can show you, for example, the paradigm. So you can see the paradigm here. So you have the paradigm is a functional sentence, okay? So you can see here perception problems. And for this role, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables. And for this role, you have another set of variable, and this generates all the categories. I can show you another table. For example, voila. Here, for example, if I look at mental self-repair, among the different mechanisms of mental self-repair, there is one that is very well known in psychology, and it is a defense mechanism against negative events or negative emotions. So I can go there. Okay, and you see. So here I have taken an already existing classification, and my main goal here was to check if I can express any complex psychological concept with IML, and I think that it's possible. So here is a kind of hierarchy of defense mechanism. Some are psychotic, like denial and distortion. Some are more immature, like splitting, acting out, idealization, projection. Some are called neurotic. This is according one particular classification. Huh? We can adopt other classifications. Repression, displacement, dissociation, reaction formation, intellectualization, and so on. And finally, the more mature defense mechanism, suppression or renunciation, in fact, sublimation, humor, and altruism. For example, I don't know what is reaction formation. I click, and you understand that, okay, to defend, it is the infinitive mood and it is a reflexive voice. So the psychological subject defends itself by means of reaction formation inspired by neurosis. But exactly what is reaction formation? I click, okay. This means that to escape one sensation and avoiding mental pain, the psychological subject make the contrary of his impulse, emotion, or thought. So you develop a contrary emotion of the primary emotion that is generally negative that you receive. Or, for example, dissociation, the psychological subject is dissociated into plural different subjects and so on. And again, okay. So now let's look at another for example, thought content, humor quality, okay. Okay, now you remember in the general architecture, there was a row that was about emotion. And in the first column, you had the emotion quality and emotion object, or humor quality. This is the humor quality. So if you try to analyze the quality of humor, you have the emotional valence from dysphoria or distress to euphoria or enthusiasm. You evaluate the emotional stability. Is it stable or labile? You have a kind of, is the patient having a broad emotional spectrum or very narrow? And specifically, what is his mood? Is it choleric, fearful, indifferent, desiring, loving, and so on? So I have given you some example, and I have showed you that every concept is defined, and all the definitions go back to the dictionary. So I just want to show you the dictionary. So here you can see different categories that organize the dictionary. If we go to psychology, because it is our subject, I go to complex feelings, because maybe we will need this to describe more precisely. So we can see there is all kinds of feelings that are available for description in the dictionary. Okay. So here I just wanted to convince you that you can say everything you want with this language. And what is it? My goal is not to create a new language, because there are a lot of constructed language, but not only can express everything, but it can be computed, because the grammar is very very regular. Okay, I think I'm going to stop now to let the discussion happen. Just to say that stop sharing. Did I stop the?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, you see, this is a project that has two main aspects. The first aspect is to improve collective intelligence in mental health, but not only in mental health. It could be generalized to health in general. And so it's I try to do good, let's say, but also there is a technical aspect, because if this information system is developed, it would be a very good example of neurosymbolic artificial intelligence, because there is a big effort of symbolic organization on one side, but on the other side, this effort is to improve the statistical calculations that are at the heart of machine learning.
Thank you very much, Pierre. It was a very important presentation today. And we have also Mauricio and Luis Lam here to talk about what you are suggesting. But one thing that impressed me the most is that IEML is an iteration, like everything in nature, because everything in nature is based on iteration. Is iterative.
Iterative, okay, I understand. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Everything is iterative. So it's based in fractal dimension. And if we can translate this concept to a language that could be put inside the computer language, it will be wonderful, because we can move science from a probabilistic step level to a more exact science. So I will start asking Luis Lam what is his impression about this kind of language, and how can it be put inside the computer system using artificial intelligence, using knowledge graphs, and use deep learning to compute all this information. Later on, I will ask Mauricio how he feel about to put all the information of DSM-5 inside IEML. Please, Lam, what is your impression now?
Hi, Pierre. Hi, everyone. So it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. Yeah, I'll do a very wide question, because I leave the question on the specifics of the application in medicine to the specialists. And in terms of the impact that IEML can have, not only for its original purpose in generating and being a language to represent and deal with knowledge and reasoning about metadata. How do you see, in a more general perspective, the direction that AI research is going on? Why do I ask this wide question? Well, perhaps we have a wide audience here, and AI these days, given the success of deep learning, is too focused on data analysis and the methods that derive from neural network learning. However, the quest for semantics And one thing that you mentioned in the beginning of the talk, that's not common knowledge among those who don't work in logic or computer science or philosophy, is the need for semantics and semantic interoperability. When we say the need for semantics in AI, what I notice after some time talking to non-specialists is people ask, well, why semantics? Even though, because we have this sentence that unfortunately is on the media, this is a semantic question. People, kind of give away meaning in science and in AI. But on the other hand, semantics is something crucial to any computational system, any AI system, and any system that we can develop further on of collective intelligence. So my question is, can you extend a little bit on a general overview of the importance of semantics, and if neurosymbolic models have a role to play here in terms of the importance that semantics and semantic understanding and meaning has in AI advancement, or even in advancement of the use of AI techniques and computational languages or IML in several domains. So the question is about, it's a focus on semantics. Thank you.
Pierre, your microphone is closed.
Yes, thank you for this question, Luis. Okay, what is the meaning of semantics? Basically, it's a meta question.
Yes,
so
it's a meta question.
I think that we should distinguish three aspects of semantics. One is the pragmatic aspect. If I am speaking, I am doing it in a social situation. And for example, here we have a scientific discussion. So there are rules of scientific discussion, and when you are asking a question, I am responding. Okay, so this is what I do in let's say in a social game. So the move that I am doing in a social game, what I am doing here, it's an act. It's pragmatic. So this is one aspect of meaning. It's a pragmatic dimension. There is a second dimension, which is the relationship, and this is very classical, the relationship between a proposition and a reference. And the relation between the proposition and the reference is also called the semantics of the proposition. And here, the problem is not if I am relevant or if I have a good effect on a situation, like in the pragmatic semantics. The problem is the proposition true or false? There is corresponds to the reference. Okay, so this is another layer of semantics. And generally, computer scientists think that it is the only layer of semantics. But there is another layer, and it is the conceptualization aspect, because before I know if this sentence corresponds to this reality, I have to understand the meaning of the sentence itself. So this is the linguistic aspect, the way words are combined together through a particular grammar, and they are able to evoke in our minds a particular representation. This is another aspect of semantics, and this is generally neglected by computer scientists, this linguistic aspect. And in fact, it is always there. For example, this is my understanding, maybe I am wrong, but you cannot do statistics on data, you cannot train algorithms on data if the data is not is not categorized, if there is no labels, if there is no annotation, you have to start from one categorization or another. Okay, so let's have a regular system of categorization. That's what I am trying to say with IML in regard to machine learning. So personally, as you know, I am in favor of neurosymbolic AI. So this is just to say that we have to use every tool that we have at our disposal and not close ourselves in one single tool that is the statistical tool. Of course, statistics are very important and very useful, but they have to be grounded or complemented by this semantic aspect. And in this semantic aspect, you have the logical dimension that has been developed since a long time by symbolic AI, but there is also a conceptualization aspect and this is what I'm trying to develop.
I think that you guys, both our discussion is very important because medicine is already a global knowledge. But the problem is that the communication does not go in the same direction. We don't have a global semantic for medicine. And this is the most important thing. And this is the question. IEML will be possible, a global language, a computable language that can communicate everybody, all the language, all the culture, and give an important step forward in global medical communication. The question is both to Louise and Pierre.
Okay, I would like just to share my screen. Up, poof, poof. Okay, so you see here. Okay, so here I am on IML dictionary. So you see now the expression in IML. Okay, it's a computer language, and the translation here in French and English. It could be in Portuguese. Okay, you can add here. Okay, PT, up. Okay, it's it just have to be translated. And but not, it's still not integrated in it's not implemented, so I have to, the parser tells me it is not right, but you understand that it can be generalized to other languages. So if we work, for example, in the framework of Pan American Health Organization, we could add Portuguese and Spanish, for example, to French and English. Okay, this is just a suggestion. But yes, James, you are perfectly right. This is what I was hoping to improve communication, to improve collective intelligence, to improve scientific research. But currently, there should be more people behind this research program, and it should be funded. So currently I am alone in this adventure. So, and that's why I thank you very much for this invitation. I stop the...
Mauricio, do you think that all these feelings will be possible to be fed in a new language that could be global?
Definitely. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I have to say that I'm really excited about everything you showed us, Professor Levy. And at first, when Professor Fleck mentioned that psychiatry was the first field of medicine in which EML would focus, I was a little bit intrigued, because why psychiatry? Because we're not exactly as how can I say, as advanced as other parts of medicines regarding diagnosis. And then I realized that the diagnosis in psychiatry and our classification systems were basically born out of a necessity for a common ontology, nosology, let's say, put it like that. And that was the biggest strength we have in psychiatry in the 20th century regarding the reliability of our diagnosis. And psychopathology in general is rooted in language, in communication and behavior. But we're currently in a crossroads in psychiatry, because our diagnoses have reliability, but they don't have biological validity. So things like you showed us, like trying to integrate biomarkers with psychopathology, this is very much what everybody's trying to do these days. And we have different approaches to diagnosis have been recently proposed. HiTOP is the one that you showed us, is one of them. Another one really interesting is the research domain criteria that you also mentioned, that is basically the idea of constructing new diagnoses based on what we already know about neuroscience, you know. So this is the biggest issue right now, how to integrate traditional psychopathology with neuroscience and perhaps construct new diagnoses more relevant to our patients and for treatment. And that's why I got so excited with what you showed us, because I was expecting something more related to how to deal with electronic health records or how to extract data from records. But what you showed us is pretty much an effort of already integrating all this knowledge. Another thing that I found fascinating is that even though you mentioned diagnosis, the things you showed us include things from different fields like psychoanalysis,
Exactly.
like neuroscience, like cognitive science.
Yes.
And the main template you showed us basically are related to domains that have been created for research domain criteria, not so much for DSM. You know, so this what got me really excited about the possible applications of this to bridge this different perspectives in psychiatry that are currently so hard to connect. Also, another thing regarding the whole idea of language and meaning, we are seeing a boom in research with AI, with machine learning and big data. But I usually, my usual concern regarding this type of research is that it doesn't matter how sophisticated your method is, if the quality of the data is not that good. You know, the results will only be as good as the quality of the data. So if we can construct a way of getting better data, meaningful data, this will certainly be a huge step forward. So this is basically my comment. I have so many other questions, but one thing that I would like to hear from you was that what do you feel is the main goals for this language? Let's say, I mean, is it regarding research? Could it be used for changing electronic health records or the way we communicate? Could we centralize personal information from our patients, which is something that would probably revolutionize medicine? And it's really interesting that we have not been able to do that until now. I would like to hear you about what do you visualize as possible applications?
Okay, first I would like to thank you, because you have understood my main concern, that was to create a conceptual framework that accommodates a lot of very different disciplines and different classification systems. This was the main effort conceptually. So yes, that was the goal. Now, how are we going to use this? I'm just a philosopher, so my specialty is conceptualization. But I have made a little inquiry of the way health information is functioning nowadays, and it is not very good. It is not very good because inside one hospital, there are difficulties to communicate the data. Data are organized by different categories and so on. So it's even worse from one hospital to another, and even worse from one country to another. So really, there is a lot of work, not only for the immediate care of the patients, but also for research. Because if we do research and at the level of populations, we have to use statistics. These statistics has to be grounded in a consistent conceptual systems, because if it is not, it will change all the time, or it will have a limited meaning and so on. So there are a lot of different levels to which we could begin to work. It could be very locally. It could be at the level of a research program. It could be, I don't know, at the level of or international health organizations setting standards and slowly beginning to make correspondences between all these different classifications with a kind of pivot categorization system. You know the situation better than me. So I am open. I just offer my services.
Pierre, I think Mauricio made a very important comment when he talked about the quality of data. And so I think we should have a global system that is able to give all this very qualified data. I remember I sent to you a suggestion based on global EPHR. It's a kind of a system that could obtain the data of the patient all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if it will be possible, if we can connect it, an EPHR, which is a personal health record, to IEML,
It's
because
difficult.
it will be universal. The great difficulty is semantic. This is the great problem since the beginning of the computer science applied to medicine is semantic, as Lamb mentioned. So, Luis, do you think that all this knowledge could be collected it's possible to make a knowledge graph and eventually feed artificial intelligence based on IEML?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's a challenging engineering process, but the thing here is how you translate the knowledge graph into IEML to make the best use of the particular data. And I think it's worth pursuing this kind of approach, starting with a very small domain where you have better possibility to design a sound system in terms of the correspondence that you will need between what you put into your knowledge graph and the way you represent that into IEML. I believe that it might be possible to follow a constructive approach from a small domain and growing up it as soon as you get better and better knowledge and grasp of what the language can offer you. I think it seems to be a very interesting development, but I kind of thought about it in 30 seconds. Okay, so I have to think deeper about it. I think Pierre can add to that.
It's a challenge, but do you think it's a doable? Luis, do you think it's doable?
I think it is doable, but you have to circumscribe yourself to a small particular domain to get the possible, the viable graph representation, and then try to translate it into the IML language. So if that's what you want to do, I believe it's possible to do that. But Pierre is a specialist in IML, can some further knowledge on this. But it's a 30-second thinking, you know. It's fast thinking. It's not even system 2 thinking.
Well, we are getting to the end of this meeting, unfortunately. But I will suggest to Pierre, to Pierre and to Lamb and to Mauricio Kunz, the possibility to make a symposium about that, make it longer, maybe 2 or 3 days. Pierre maybe can organize these in the near future. Do you think it's doable, Pierre?
Organize a symposium. Maybe, but you know, you said I'm just associate professor at the University of Montreal. I'm currently retired, so if I receive some help, maybe, but this is I have to think about it. It's an excellent suggestion, let's say.
Luis is now directly related to MIT, and maybe he can lead the organization of this.
When people tell me organization of symposia, I think, well, I'm going to use system 2 here and say, well, I have to think for a long time before accepting anything connected to that.
But let's say, I think it's too early to decide to decide about a symposium. Maybe we should. Well, first, you ask I'm speaking to James. You ask to Luis a very specific and technical question. He cannot really answer before knowing a little bit better IML itself, because he's a very serious engineer and he does not want to say something that he's not completely sure about. So this is one thing. And secondly, the general direction that you, James, are indicating, I think it's the right direction. Personally, I would like to have a collaboration, more collaboration with people in medicine or in psychiatry, because this is the beginning of a research. And I think also that Luis was completely right when he said we have to begin by a little thing, check if it works, and if it works, if there are some results that are encouraging, then maybe organize a symposium. But organize a symposium about something that just hypothesis or just my own work, rather solitary, I'm not sure it is quite mature.
Okay. Okay, so maybe we can get together for more meetings and elaborate this a little bit better.
Yes,
I think
yes.
Mauricio can help us a lot, including people from psychiatry department of our university and psychiatry department of all other universities around the world. I would like to thank you very much, Pierre Levy, for this wonderful presentation, this wonderful vision about the application of IEML to medicine. It's a landmark, I think, in my point of view. I'd like to thank you very much, Luis Lam, to dedicate this special time sharing his knowledge and his ability in computer science with us. I'd like to thank you, Mauricio Kunz, for understanding all this objective. And I would like to present Luciana Stefani, who is the education director of our hospital. I didn't mention it before, but she's here. She's the only woman between us. But she's a very strong woman, and she is doing a wonderful work in our university hospital. And I would like to thank you, Brazil, Silva Neto, to stay with us during all the day, and Paulo to make this wonderful background for us conducting the technical part of this meeting with the Jitsi, the first time we used this platform. But it worked very well, yeah.
Yes, it's open source and it works very well.
So if you wanted to stay a little bit more, no problem. We are now closing the presentation, the streaming. Paulo, podemos fechar já a apresentação, tá? And we can stay if you want a little bit more, no problem, ok? Nos avisa, Paulinho, quando completou.